have the Vancouver Canucks taken a step back without Tanev and Markstrom. And the Edmonton Oilers, much like the Toronto Maple Leafs, didn't make it through the play-in round. Lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. What are they going to be this year? I know Leon Draisaitl said in the press conference, people forget we were the best team in Canada last year. But again, it's like people have forgotten because it doesn't matter. And it's not
it doesn't.
It's not to diminish his accomplishment.
So dry,
he had an MVP season, but it doesn't matter. What are the Edmonton Oilers now? What are the Vancouver Canucks now? So we saw a little bit, what I loved anyway, of on the Vancouver side, we saw a little bit of the future. Nils Hoglander, probably the best player on the ice through 2 periods. Just really fun. Really, really fun to watch. And if you look at the score sheet for Vancouver, Besser with 2, Quinn Hughes with the setup for a goal, Pettersson setting up Besser on the other, Horvat with a goal, Horvat, Besser, Pettersson, Hughes. Those are the names you need to hear if the Vancouver Canucks are going to make the playoffs this year. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so losing JT Miller, we don't know for how long, is obviously devastating for them. Losing Markstrom in the offseason, even though they got Demko and Holtby, is devastating. But I look at their roster and just the way they scored yesterday, and I'm already not feeling awesome about my Canadian division picks. The Oilers, we already know what their strengths are. I still don't know about the goaltending. And if Koskinen takes a step back, you're cooked. You're
because it's not going to be Mike Smith that brings you in.
No. So you need Koskinen to be great or you're cooked. And then with the Canucks, they don't have Markstrom, but I could see a scenario where their goaltending's good. They lost Tanev, but I could see a scenario where their defense is good. And then up front, they still got all these monsters. And then they brought in some new ones. And then once they get Miller, they'll have arguably their best forward from last season, or, top 3. I think we might have underrated the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah. Well, it is one game.
It is one, but
Braden Holtby did look good. Jesse, you want to say something?
There was a tweet, too, from Wyshynski on, I think it was Tuesday before opening night, and he was saying a lot of the chatter from media members on preseason Hart Trophy winners was Elias Pettersson. He's getting a lot of love from everybody around the game because I think he's going to take this next step that nobody really, some people are anticipating him to do. And that's really going to push the Canucks, I think, this year.
Especially if they make the playoffs.
A couple years ago at the Mats Sundin tournament, remember when we talked to Mats and he was like, that's the guy I'm excited about.
Yeah.
He was, how did everyone go wrong? That guy went 5th. How did everyone go wrong so quickly?
Jim Benning's a great, there's no question about Jim Benning's scouting. And he's done a great job drafting for the Vancouver Canucks. Not crazy about his free agent signings, but Braden Holtby looked all right last night too. And that's a good sign. Now on the Oilers track, you have McDavid with 0 points, but he had five shots. Eventually he's going to score. My biggest thing is obviously the Oilers know 5-on-5 that if they don't improve this year, it's going to cook them, right? They need to do that. One guy that I was he scored last night, but I'm wondering more and more, is this guy does he just not have it anymore? Is Adam Larson. I know he scored a goal and that sort of thing, but he wasn't good last year. Frankly, he just wasn't good. And it was not a good start for him. And even if you read all the Edmonton writers this morning, they're all saying Adam Larson's noticeably, and I don't know if that's, if he's overmatched in his position, if he's had too many injuries, or if he is injured, because Clefbaum is a right shot defenseman, is he not?
He might. I don't know if he plays the right side, but I believe he's a lefty.
Right, and with Tyson Barrie getting most of the offensive zone time on the right side, you would think Larson's going to have to be the quote-unquote defensive defenseman. The problem is they're not sure he can do that anymore. And that could be a huge problem for the Oilers.
Yeah, and it's not going to be Barry defensively, Oilers fans. He'll put up points for you. It's not going to be him defensively. So if Larson can't do it, and Barry can't do it, at this point, you're looking at Ethan Bear. And if that guy doesn't take an enormous step, he's only 23.
It's unfair to ask.
Have fun with that. if he doesn't take an enormous step, you could really have a problem back there.
And one thing to watch too is Adam Larson's the UFA at the end of this year, and there's a bunch of guys who are coming up this year. I think it's going to be a big offseason for free agency, but I think Adam Larson's a prime candidate for a trade deadline. Just either the Oilers are struggling to make the playoffs, or they're in it and they ship him off for something else. And I think he might just be either it's a non-contender who's picking up some salary cap and giving the Oilers something, or it's a contender who thinks, hey, maybe Adam Larsson on our third pair is what it'll take to push us over the hump.
I think there's going to be a lot of activity at the beginning of February because we saw there was the beginning of the season waiver stuff. There's some trickle waiver stuff. You know what? I think the Oilers are going to claim Aaron Dell. I do. Because the Leafs are doing their best to hide him. Mm-hmm. And I think eventually they're going to have to put him on there, and eventually they're going to lose him unless they find the perfect scenario. And then I think, once teams go, okay, we've exhausted the waiver wire. We've seen our team for a little bit. We know what we got. We know what we don't. I think beginning of February, teams aren't going to waste time because, there's all these regulations and quarantine and all that, especially if you see a team with like a 4-day gap in their schedule, which like the Leafs, for example, only have 1 or 2 of. Yeah, I think we'll see a flurry of activity there.
Even more so if it's an American player or a player on an American team going to a Canadian team, because you need to leave even more buffer room to get them quarantined, and then they need to isolate and then get them on the roster and then get them adjusted with the new game plan and all that stuff. So yeah, I can definitely see the actions happening earlier and earlier in the season.
Yeah, you have to make if you feel like you're in trouble, you have to make your decision now. There are 56 games and now 55 if you're Edmonton, right?
Yeah.
You got to make your moves now. So I beginning of February is my guess.
Wow. Really, really interesting.